Today I'm showing you how to make my sourdough derby pie scones. They are just like the pie but in scone form. Let's go make it. This recipe is such a fun one. I turned the famous Kentucky Derby pie into a derby pie scone. So it is just basically the pie and scone form. It's fantastic. There's chocolate chips and walnuts. You are going to love it. Let's get started. So first we have 2 cups of all-purpose flour in this bowl. We're gonna add in half of a cup of light brown sugar, as well as half of a teaspoon of salt. I like to use sea salt. 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And then we're gonna grab a dough whisk or a spoon, you can use either, and we're gonna stir this together. You wanna make sure all of the brown sugar pieces and like the clumps are all stirred in. You don't wanna have big clumps of brown sugar in your scones. After you've done that, you're gonna grab half of a cup of butter. This is also 8 tablespoons. So you're going to incorporate this in 2 ways. You can use a cheese grater and just grate your butter in. That's the easiest way and the recommended way. Or you can chop this into little chunks and use a fork to make it little pea-sized pieces in your dough. I highly recommend grabbing your cheese grater and doing it this way though. Just gonna grate that in. And you wanna use cold stick butter. You do not wanna use margarine for this. And I like to use a salted cold stick butter for this recipe. Then you're gonna grab your spoon, whisk, whatever you're using, and you're gonna stir in your butter. Again, making sure there's no large chunks or anything. Next, we're gonna add in 1 cup of mini semi-sweet chocolate chips, as well as 1 cup of chopped up walnuts. So you're gonna want them to be in little pieces, so kind of like this. If you can see it, I'll bring them up. So you're gonna do little pieces like this. You're gonna add that in, so 1 cup, and then you're gonna stir those in as well, just to make sure they're evenly combined. Once you have those combined, you're gonna add in half of a cup of milk. You can use any kind, I use whole milk, as well as half of a cup of sourdough discard, aka unfed starter. I like to have a thick starter, so my starter is not super runny, even when it's discard. That is key for making these scones. Then we're gonna add in half of a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, as well as 1 egg. We're gonna mix this to combine. You're gonna have to mix a pretty good amount of time just to make sure everything combines in here. You wanna refrain from adding any extra liquid if possible. Once your mixture becomes crumbly like this, that means you can use your hands. So you're really gonna have a hard time combining this dough with a spoon or anything. So you need to use your hands and you're gonna just combine it together. This is the part where if it's not combining at all and it's not picking up any of the excess from the bottom, you're gonna wanna add in more, but like you can see, it's a lot of excess on the bottom. That is exactly what you want. You're gonna just combine that in. It's gonna take a few seconds to do, but it will combine. When your flour mixture on the bottom is almost completely combined, if there's a little bit, it's okay. You then have 2 options. So we're gonna chill this either way. You can do quick scones, which means you're gonna cover the dough with a lid or saran wrap and put it in the freezer for 10 minutes. Or if you wanna add more gut benefits or you wanna give yourself more time or make these ahead, you can put these in the refrigerator for 12 hours up to 48 hours. It depends how much time you want, but after 12 hours you will have added gut benefits. And if you do the refrigeration long ferment option, you do not have to freeze your scones. But if you wanna do a quick scones, do not put them in the fridge, put them in the freezer for 10 minutes. Once your dough has chilled in the freezer for at least 10 minutes, you're going to put it out on the counter. As you can see, there's a little bit of loose flour mixture still on the bottom. That's completely fine. You're then going to knead your dough a little bit, so about 30 seconds, just to incorporate the rest of these crumblies and just get everything combined together. You do not want to overwork your scone dough or the butter will melt. If your dough begins to stick, grab a little bit of flour and sprinkle on your dough and on the countertop. I highly recommend doing that. Before we get any farther with this recipe, you'll want to cover a sheet pan with parchment paper, and then you're also going to want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to add a little extra flour just because it's sticking a little bit. And then to continue this recipe, we are going to shape this a 6-inch wide, 2-inch high disc. So you're just going to use your hands to pat it down and turn it into the disc shape. Once you've shaped it in that way, you're going to take a bench scraper, a pizza cutter, or a knife. You're going to cut this into 8 triangles like a pizza. So 1 down the middle, 1 from side to side to make 4, and then you're going to cut each 4 into 2. So like this, and you'll have 8 scones. Then we're going to grab our parchment lined sheet pan, and we're going to place these on the sheet pan. Make sure they are not touching and they're about 2 inches away from one another. Now we're going to place our scones in the preheated oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 to 22 minutes until they're golden brown and completely baked all the way through. You can test this using a toothpick in the center of your scone, and if no dough comes out on the toothpick, then they're completely baked and ready to go. Once your scones are fully baked, set them on a cooling rack or a coaster and let them cool. You could have these for a snack, breakfast, lunch with a little bit of cheese and beef sticks on the side or beef jerky. This is such a good way to have derby pie, but in a scone form. I'll leave the link to the recipe over on the blog down in the description below. You can go over there and print and save if you would like to do that with this recipe. These scones will be good for 3 to 4 days at room temperature if they're stored in an airtight container. I recommend eating them within 3 days. You can also store them in the freezer for 3 to 6 months if they're stored in an airtight container for in there. You can wrap them individually in parchment paper and place them in a baggie or some kind of glass freezer safe container. Let's give one a try. They're still hot, so I'll use a fork. Oh my gosh, that is so good. You get chocolate, you get walnuts, it is just like the pie, but better. Until next time, go bring life into your home through the kitchen.